Javier Milei, anarcho-capitalist libertarian, now president of Argentina, has brought forth the ideals in a way that they have not been pushed into the mainstream since that of Ron Paul and the Liberty Revolution. And man, I genuinely cannot believe it. We have a libertarian anarcho-capitalist president of a country in the 21st century. We have not seen something like this since that of Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. And what I find unbelievable about this is that we've already seen the flames have been stoked, and now it's time to truly kindle the fires and allow this to spread abroad. Because with it, we can see that the noble ideals that are the fundamentals of what it means to associate with other people through the nature of voluntary mechanisms, well, what does that lead to? It leads to the most prosperous standard of a free society that is capable of achieving. And that is detached from the regulatory structure that is the state, because the state is nothing more than a parasitic entity on the back of the civilian populace, because the state doesn't create anything. All the state does is siphon your labor to fund its pet projects and pay its cronies. And that is nothing more than a parasite. What we have is it literally leeches the lifeblood from you, being that of your dollar and your labor, and it will consistently destroy it, whether it is that through inflation or whether it is through the possibility of consistently ramping up your taxes. And with it, what does that mean? That means if we are ramping up your taxes to deal with the fact of inflation, because inflation is making the dollar worth less, well, we're going to have to ramp up your taxes more because the dollar is worth less, so we're going to need more money to fund our pet projects, which means we're only going to have more inflation because we're going to have to print more money to make sure we can have more money within the system itself, which is only going to devalue the dollar more, which is only going to lead to more inflation. And this is exactly what happened to Argentina, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and the United States is on this path. Now, what we can do to avoid this is to focus on the fundamentals of what it means to pay attention to liberty, libertarianism, and the ideals of anarcho-capitalism and how these apply to the market. And with it, now let's go ahead and jump into the nature of what this video is all about. Javier Milei and how what he has done has inspired a revolution. Now let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the people who have inspired Javier Milei, who he's quoted, why it's important who he's quoting, and the fact is we will also be going into a small breakdown of what it means to be an anarcho-capitalist. Let's go ahead and get into it. The first person we're going to be starting this off with is Liam McCullum, and this is a tweet that I thought was just fantastic place to make this our jumping off point. And if you're someone who's interested in the ideas of liberty, libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism, anarchy, well, Liam's a fantastic place for you to go. And with it, I would argue if you were to just follow him and you were to go ahead and interact or follow the people that he interacts with, you would most certainly find your way to the people which would guide you properly down this path and lead you towards the noble fundamentals of why liberty is the most important ideal to strive for. All right, now let's get into it. What we see is, okay, so Javier Milei wants to end the central bank, wants a free banking system, wants competition of money, wants to slash bureaucracies, is an Austrian economist, quotes Ludwig von Mises, quotes Friedrich Hayek, quotes Murray Rothbard, quotes Henry Hazlitt, quotes Milton Friedman, quotes Lysander Spooner, quotes Bob Murphy, calls himself an anarchist, calls himself a libertarian. Pause. If you are unfamiliar with any of those names, please go ahead, and if you are interested in these ideas, just go ahead and write them down, because they could not be more relevant to you growing and understanding the nature of what makes these ideals so beautiful. And let's go ahead, jump on. He says, okay, and he's apparently pro-Israel and pro-US foreign policy too, which is a big issue. But as he says, before you freak out, first, he's not the president of the US, which is the world hegemon. He's the first president of Argentina of that of an anarcho-capitalist. He's the most likely playing along to get along, considering the US is the world empire and they're dollarizing, which he says is strictly an instrument to abolish the central bank and allow competition of money and free banking. Second, ideas are powerful. Even if he doesn't really believe these things, he says about the central banks and socialism, millions are hearing these ideas for the first time, so we should take advantage of that. Your Republican friends posting that 1 Milei clip to own the libs, sit them down and talk to them about Austrian economics. Let's just suppose Milei is a huge foreign policy hawk. Even if he is, we know he has also described central banks as a parasitic institution that steals from the public thanks to the inflation tax. Libertarians know that war and almost every other government program is financed by central banks. Without the Federal Reserve, the U.S. could not afford its endless wars. And his ideas point in that direction. If a stable and sizable population in the U.S. could be convinced by his ideas on central banks, which are larger than Milei himself, but they still believe in a hawkish foreign policy, I would still claim that this is a major success, because they would necessarily be constrained by a sound monetary policy, and if we had adopted sound money and banking, that would be a huge blow to the war machine. Milei is a politician and he's just one man. No, we shouldn't put faith in him. Yes, we should be skeptical of him, but we should be ecstatic that our ideas are being shared globally. And that is absolutely true. We need to take advantage of that because this is the most important thing. We can see that the embers are lit. Now it's time to just give it oxygen to stoke the flames. And here we see from Libertarian Party of Michigan, Milei could be defaulting to U.S. foreign policy and dollarization because he knows of what happens to South American leaders who defy the U.S. And Liam says exactly. And this is my thoughts exactly. And Milei is fantastic so far, except for the nature of his support for Israel and what's going on with how he was talking about support for Ukraine. But this could be, like we've said, go along to get along. And now what do we see? We see his first attempt at slashing a major ministry within the government. Argentina's new Trump-like president, Javier Milei, keeps his promise and has announced that Argentina's Ministry of Women, Gender, and Equality will close in 21 days. I hope people within the U.S. are taking notes. And here's the thing. People say Trump-like president Javier Milei. Well, as I've stated numerous times, I wish Donald Trump was half as good on half of the issues that Javier Milei was good on, because then maybe he would have actually been a really good president. Now, we go ahead and we jump in and we see Make Money Private again, another tweet from Liam McCullum, and this is a clip of Javier Milei talking about the poison that is central banks and how the Leviathan that is the actual apparatus of things like the IMF and the World Bank is the lifeblood that fuels that of things like the world empire. Now let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
Se habla de bitcoins en los medios, se habla de bitcoins todo el tiempo. No sabemos bien qué son los bitcoins, pero ya hay gente que lo pondera como una especie de alternativa monetaria. ¿Vos creés que es posible en Argentina esa discusión?
A ver, ¿cuál es el punto? El punto es que lo primero que hay que comprender es que el Banco Central es una estafa, ¿sí? Es un mecanismo por el cual los políticos estafan a las personas de bien con el impuesto inflacionario. El Bitcoin lo que está representando es la vuelta del dinero a su creador originario, que es el sector privado. El dinero es una invención del sector privado para resolver problemas, digamos, lo que tiene que ver con, en una economía de trueque, sería la doble coincidencia y la indivisibilidad, y después aparece el papel, digamos, como una cuestión de portabilidad. O sea, porque en realidad vos tuviste distintas monedas, o sea, tuviste el lino, el trigo, digamos, la sal, de ahí viene salario, de ahí sí. La superstición de si se cae la sal en la mesa, y eso evolucionó y las monedas que eligieron los agentes, que fueron los individuos, eligieron la plata para las transacciones chicas, el oro para las transacciones grandes, y eso después, digamos, como era un peligro cargarlo, entonces ¿qué hacían? Lo dejaban depositado y se llevaban un comprobante de que estaba eso ahí. Y después en 1445, digamos, en el primer congreso de Génova, digamos, los estados se apropiaron de, digamos, de tener la exclusividad para poder emitir. Ese es que es el curso forzoso, que esta es la clave. ¿Por qué? Porque el curso forzoso es lo que le permite a los políticos robarte con el impuesto inflacionario. El Bitcoin no, digamos, tiene un algoritmo y un día va a llegar a una determinada cantidad y no hay más. Y puede competir con otras monedas, de hecho compite contra Ethereum, compite contra otras. ¿Y qué es lo interesante? Que es la vuelta al sector privado. Pero ¿cuál es el problema? El problema es que los estados no te van a querer ceder que el curso forzoso, porque del curso forzoso te estafan con el impuesto inflacionario. Entonces el Bitcoin es la reacción natural frente a la estafa que son los bancos centrales y que el dinero vuelva a ser privado, y la contracara es que los políticos ladrones no te van a permitir ir contra el curso forzoso. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? Cuando vos tenés economías con alta inflación y el problema de la estafa es más claro, entonces hasta podés discutir, como digamos planteo yo, directamente eliminar el Banco Central.
And what do we see here from Javier Milei? We see that he's doing exactly what Liam was talking about, sitting down with people on a personable level and having a conversation with them to explain what causes the inflationary pressures that makes them feel the woes from the economic disturbances that so many people have been suffering under, whether it be Argentina or whether it be in the United States. Because with the analysis that we can provide through the lens of Austrian economics, we can explain to people the nature of what really makes these things happen, rather than just using this fluff talk that you see out of people like Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell, or people like Sergio Massa and many of the people within the economic ministries, whether in the United States, in Venezuela, in Argentina, or what happened with Zimbabwe. We saw the collapse of Weimar Germany's currency, and that was because of what happened with the Treaty of Versailles. And the thing is, This is nothing more than proof positive in my eyes that what's going on with the nature of the movement of the spreading of the ideals of anarcho-capitalism and liberty and libertarianism could not be more relevant when it comes to the nature of today's day and age, especially with the fact that us in the United States are now $34 trillion in debt. Think about that. $34 trillion with a $600,000 liability per citizen clause. That is what the federal government thinks you owes if they were ever to default on their debt. Keep that in mind. They also have a $600,000 liability per citizen clause for children. Even the children, if they had to call it in, well, I'm sorry, but these kids, this is how much they owe to the government. And that is a total misunderstanding of how money is supposed to work, because money should be privatized, and with it, that is the nature of why things like Bitcoin are so important, and why Javier Milei focusing on the nature of money returning to the private sector is such a valuable thing. Now let's go ahead and jump into this thread from ANCAP Air explaining what is anarcho-capitalism. Since ANCAP is trending, I felt it pertinent to educate those who might have the curiosity of theirs piqued by Javier Milei winning in Argentina. First, the word anarchy. This is misunderstood to mean chaos, disorder, and lawlessness. This is actually the very opposite of the word's definition. As I cover in my book, The Liberty Solution, the etymology of the word goes back to the ancient Greek word akaira, meaning king or ruler. The prefix "and" simply applies the negative, so anarchy means without a king or ruler. This is the same Greek root word with which we get the word monarchy, meaning one ruler, or hierarchy, meaning holy rulers. Anarchy means that no individual or entity has any level of ownership over your life, your body, and the fruits of your labor. It means individualism and self-ownership. Statism, with which what we currently exist, is the utopian idea that the right people controlling just the right amount of centralized violence can coerce people into my line of thinking and thus make the world a better place as a result of it. That is the very definition of slavery. Anarchy means that every individual is in charge of their own lives. That is the very definition of liberty. Capitalism is also a concept misunderstood by many. It is thought to be an exploitative system designed to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. This again is the opposite of its definition. Capitalism is the use of property for the profit of the individual, aka you. Property is not just personal possessions a person has, it is also their body and their labor. To invest your personal capital for profit, e.g. voluntary exchange for your skills to a company for a wage, is to engage in capitalism. In short, capitalism is nothing more than the free and voluntary exchange of private property. There are no bailouts, there's no such thing as too big to fail, there's only your property and its growth based on objective merit. I would love to welcome you to read my book, The Liberty Solution, for a deeper dive into anarcho-capitalism. The link is pinned in my tweet. Anarchism should be the future with which we all strive. Maybe one day soon we can achieve it, and truly our lives will live as we see fit. And this is something that I think people need to understand, is that you can live how you desire without demanding others do exactly as you please. And why is that? It's because it doesn't matter what other people do behind closed doors, as long as they're not hurting other people, as long as they're not violating the non-aggression principle. Because what we should stand for is liberty and the people who stand for property rights. Because as we see, the only rights that there are that truly exist are property rights, the rights that matter to you and your person and those that do not violate others. And what this is a negative right. And what many people akin to the socialists that talk about the nature of how we have to have so many of these government programs because it's important that we fund so many of these different things for all of these disparate people. Well, how do they do this? They do it from other people's labor, and they do it through an inflationary tax which destroys the dollar. And that is nothing more than subjugation of your labor, because you are being demanded to fund things that you in your wildest dreams would have never signed off on. And this is nothing more than subjugation. And the thing that we see today, especially with the nature of the inflationary state of the currency, whether it be in Argentina or in the United States, this isn't capitalism. This is cronyism, because the people at the top consistently end up winning. It doesn't matter if they're in the banker class, if they're in the war machine, whether it's the military-industrial complex, or they're people who are speaking for massive institutional benefactors like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, or many of these other benefactors like places who are just, I don't know, huge hedge funds that end up funding these massive war parties that end up going off and, let's say, I don't know, funding think tanks for a weapons lobby so they can go ahead and get Congress, so they can go ahead and, I don't know, lobby more people to fund their ideals, and then with that they've captured more people within the political sector. And this is why it's important that we do not have the nature of government controlling how we orient ourselves in society. With that, as I said, go ahead, check out his book, The Liberty Solution. I'm going to be reading it tonight as I make this video. After I edit it, that is going to be my plan. And with it, what are we going to be doing now? We're going to be jumping into this clip of Javier Milei. Argentinian president candidate Javier Milei tells Tucker Carlson what advice he has for Americans. Never embrace the ideals of socialism. We have to be prepared for this and wage a cultural war every single day. And that's absolutely right. We most certainly do. And with it, what's most important about that is to have people on the economic front speaking up. And the one thing that I absolutely adore about this clip is that Javier Milei mentions this and the fact that it was Milton Friedman who said this. And as Liam's initial tweet stated, the people he's quoting are the right ones. Milton Friedman, Hayek, Rothbard. Are you kidding me? At points when I listen to Javier Milei, I wonder if he's even real, because the fact is, as I've stated once and I'll say it 1,000 times, if Donald Trump was half as good on half of the issues, I would be stunned. And the fact that this man has now won the seat of presidency is unbelievable. Let's get into this clip.
Socialism has become ascendant, really, in the United States, as you may have noticed, with the attendant symptoms you described: massive public debt levels, increasing poverty, disorder, crime, filth, and ugliness. Argentina is at the end stage of that. Argentina is now a poor country because of those policies. What advice would you give to Americans having lived it?
Que nunca abracen las ideas del socialismo, que nunca se dejen seducir por el canto de las sirenas de la justicia social, que no se dejen atrapar por esa frase nefasta que donde hay una ansiedad nace un derecho, pero que eso no se hace solo. Para eso hay que estar preparado y hay que dar la batalla cultural día a día, y que hay que tener cuidado porque ellos no tienen problema en meterse adentro del Estado y aplicar las técnicas de Gramsci, seduciendo a artistas, seduciendo, o sea, la cultura, seduciendo a los medios de comunicación, o metiéndose en los contenidos de la educación. Hay que tener mucho cuidado, hay que cortarles el financiamiento y hay que hacerlos competir a la par, y al mismo tiempo hay que concientizar a los empresarios de que es necesario que más allá... Milton Friedman decía que la función social del empresario era ganar dinero. Bueno, con eso solo no alcanza. Parte de la inversión tiene que ser invertir en los defensores de las ideas de la libertad para que los socialistas no puedan avanzar, porque si no lo hacen, ellos se van a meter en el Estado y desde el Estado van a imponer una agenda que de largo plazo va a terminar destruyendo todo lo que toca. Entonces, ahí, digamos, es necesario un fuerte compromiso de todos los creadores de riqueza para luchar contra el socialismo, contra el estatismo, y entender que si eso no se hace, los socialistas siempre van a seguir intentando. Porque, ¿cuál es el punto? Como ellos intentan vivir de los demás sin trabajar, ellos son incansables en buscar esto. Porque su leitmotiv en la vida es vivir de los otros. Entonces ellos no ceden nunca en este mecanismo de apropiación de la riqueza y del dinero o de la generación de ingresos de otro. Entonces esa batalla tiene que ser dada de manera permanente. No se puede descansar, porque cuando uno descansa, el socialismo avanza.
We have to be able to wage a cultural war every single day and be weary and capable of doing so, because when we falter, socialism will always creep in. And one thing I thought that was so interesting about what he said was the fact that in their pursuits, they are tireless because their sole desire is to live off of the fruits of others' labor. And I just thought that was a poignant way to put it. And Javier Milei, in this Tucker Carlson interview, could not have worded what he wanted to say better. And I would argue basically every single interaction. I thought he pulled just an ace clutch, 10 out of 10, rolled nothing but 20s, and it was just fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Go ahead, check out the fundamentals and the beautiful ideals of libertarianism and what it means to look into anarcho-capitalism and anarchy. You should not be living under the subjugation of what others deem necessary for you to be free, because that is nothing more than tyranny. I'm going to go ahead and cut it there. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Subscribe if you like this kind of content. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comments section down below. Man, God bless the people of Argentina. I've been saying it so much in these videos when I talk about Javier Milei in Argentina, and my goodness, will I continue to keep saying it. Stay lovely, stay great. Thank you for watching. Tell someone you love them. Peace out.